Hi, and thanks for joining today's case study session with our friends over at Ingles Market. Today, we're going to talk about how Ingles modernized its customer support services using intelligent voice and AI. And hope you enjoy the story. So obviously, a couple quick disclosures with regards to some of the content that we'll cover today for you to take under advisement. So that being said, I'd like to introduce you to our guest speaker today, Bill. Bill is the help desk manager at Ingles Market. He's responsible for the entire enterprise and store level support for Ingles Market. And with 24 years of IT experience, he is truly an expert when it comes to IT help desk, customer service, infrastructure in general. And in his role at Ingles Market, he's been truly focused on how to transform the support operations over at Ingles, to adjust and adapt to some of the changes, obviously quite a few that have opened or have occurred over the recent years. So with that, it's my pleasure and privilege to introduce you to Bill. Bill, thanks for joining us.
Hi, my name is Bill Zeem. I'm the help desk manager at Ingles Markets. Great to join you, G.
Likewise.
So Ingles Markets, let me tell you a little bit about it. So we operate in 6 states in the southeastern United States. We are a grocery store chain. We went through a deployment of ITSM and CSM in 2019. And in late 2020, we integrated it in the 3C Logic solution.
Excellent, excellent. So basically, anybody in the Southeast, if they're shopping for food, most likely they're familiar with Ingles. Is that a fair statement?
We hope so.
Yeah. That's the plan, right? So we're going to ignore the fact that last year was one for the record books, right? A lot of disruption, a lot of changes, obviously tied to the pandemic. But even pandemic notwithstanding, Ingles had its fair share of challenges that you guys were hoping to solve for. Is that a fair statement, Bill?
Oh, absolutely. It was a banner year for the grocery business, but also made for a very busy year from a support standpoint. We covered a whole lot of challenges.
I bet. So you and I got together and we put together a few that really defined some of the things that led you to looking at the 3C Logic solution in the context of your very recent deployment with ServiceNow. But first, let's maybe lay the groundwork for our audience in terms of some of the challenges that you guys were sort of facing, pre any deployment. The first one being is, at Ingles, up until then, you guys had an on-premise contact center solution, right? That was, in I think your own words, a little bit inflexible. Can you tell our audience a little bit about that?
Sure. Our prior ACD, it was based on hardwired desk phones. It bound our agents to a single desk. It didn't allow for any kind of remote connectivity.
Now, in a post-COVID world, what was the impact of that?
Well, it's obviously not ideal. It doesn't let us really get to where we need to. It gave us no disaster recovery backup. The ability to move agents and move them within the building, to move them remotely as needed, exposure situations and what have you. We had no options for that.
Gotcha. So we're talking a little bit about business continuity as well as convenience, which makes a lot of sense, especially with this whole remote work or maybe hybrid form of work, remote work that's taken hold. That all makes sense. Another challenge, though, that I know you and I have spoken about was sort of this dependency on technical resources. Whenever you wanted to make changes to the call flow when people were calling into your help desk, is that correct?
That is correct. So any time I needed to change our IVR, things as simple as changing our holiday hours or re-recording a greeting, an emergency greeting, required 1, possibly 2 other teams within our IT organization, which then required planning. There was no on-the-fly work.
So just speed or time to response, and then of course the impact on the customer experience, because you're talking about setting expectations,
right?
Or when people call in, right?
Yes, it gave us really no expectation to place out to them. I'm too dependent upon other people's schedules to be able to do it.
Right. And with the ServiceNow platform, you today have control, or at least when you deployed ServiceNow, over the digital medium. So people, if they want to do self-service over portal and so forth, You had control over that. But when it came to people calling in, you didn't have the same degree of flexibility or oversight in that regard. And that, of course, was creating some impact in terms of just ease of control, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Gotcha. So that sort of leads into that one of the other challenges, which is that you had selected ServiceNow. And to be clear for our audience, you're using both IT service management as well as customer service management within the ServiceNow suite. But had you stayed with your existing on-premise system, there was no out-of-the-box integration with ServiceNow, right? So if someone called in, tell us a little bit about what that experience was potentially going to look like.
Right. So if somebody calls in, they called in on a completely separate system. We'd answer the phone, we'd log a ticket. I mean, I guess that's your standard help desk fare. The problem is I was stuck chasing KPI data from 2, sometimes 3 different sources. So if you were to ask me to report on how many calls I got and then how many calls I got relating to X, Y, or Z, I would have to look at least 2 places. Yes, for any other data, I'd probably have to go to a third.
Yep.
From an administrative standpoint, it was a nightmare.
Gotcha. And then, so you kind of hit on KPIs, right? So reporting was another pain point when it came to just how much reporting you had access to begin with, right?
Yeah, our prior ACD, I mean, reporting was difficult to retrieve and it really had sparse or no information. Believe it or not, I couldn't even report on outbound phone calls. Add to that the lack of integration with ServiceNow, and it ended up impacting our overall KPI data to the point of often under-reporting our overall support volume. It's really hard to sell the support level and get the correct staffing in place if we're under-reporting calls by sometimes up to a third.
And since we're talking about calls, I mean, backing up a little bit, why are voice calls still important to your help desk? I mean, obviously there's this momentum, towards digital transformation, towards anything and everything a customer should be able to resolve themselves, but that's not necessarily a reality, right? So at Ingles, why do people still call? Is it typically for things that are more complex, time sensitive, than can be addressed over self-service mediums?
Really, it's mostly urgent matters. When you start dealing with the urgency of the retail business, and retail is a lot of I need it now, I need it yesterday. You're dealing with a lot of customer facing type issues, and realistically, I would say 50, 60, 70% of our issues are going to be these urgent, time sensitive customer issues. If it's customer facing, we'd rather have a phone call and get it taken care of right away.
That makes sense. And that kind of leads to that last challenge that I know you guys were having, which is, look, if these calls are so critical, right, and they're that important, then you want to make sure that you're really offering a sophisticated level of support, right? So at some point, there needs to be some level of quality assurance in terms of just how successful are the engagements between the customers you serve and the agents that are providing the services or solving for the inquiry. But that was a challenge, predating any deployment of ServiceNow and 3C Logic as well. What did that look like?
Well, I mean, to access our recorded calls prior to 3C Logic required us to access a separate server, search for the file, and no, there wasn't an easy way to find that file. Oftentimes taking several minutes just to locate one recorded call. Wasn't tied at all into either the case or the incident. So then we would have to chase the case or the incident separately. So, I mean, just from an administrative time standpoint, the impact was huge. Ended up limiting the number of agent calls that we could monitor or QA in a month, thereby really kind of hurting our development with our agents.
And so, yeah, so you're talking about agent coaching, right? The opportunity to know what to fix or what training might be, required to help your agents. And then you're talking about just saving you the time from having to search for something and instead having it easily accessible to you, at the minute that you need it. And then presumably saving that time for more useful, purposes. And all that makes sense. So obviously, these challenges effectively, if we reverse engineer them, they really became your list of requirements when you sought out a voice and contact center solution. Your agents can now work from home. obviously easier administration when it comes to creation of voice workflows, and integration with ServiceNow, which of course you didn't have before, as well as all of the reporting and analytics that you could hope for, which is in stark contrast to what you had before implementation of the 3C Logic solution with ServiceNow. All right, well then you actually shared some KPIs. So I'm actually gonna go through a few of them, which is, and for our audience, let's put things in perspective here. These are outcomes within the first 90 days of Ingles Market deploying 3C Logic's voice and sentiment tools and contact center platform with ServiceNow. And the first one was, I mean, you kind of hit on this a lot, which is just the native benefits of being able to have more time to coach your agents. So one of the first things that happened is you saw an increase in agent performance of 3 percentage points. Tell us a little bit about that.
In the first 90 days using the product, which is a wow factor, we increased our average QA scores for agents from 85 to 88%. Mm-hmm. Now, I understand that not everybody here is as call center centric as I am probably, but a 3% increase over the first 90 days of a product is astronomical.
Yeah.
So we've been able to discover and address some issues like call dead airtime. That's resulted in a shortage overall handle times. Everything's kind of coming together and working together as one. And to tell the story, like I said, 3% doesn't seem like a lot, but 3% when it ties into 3% here and 5% here and 10% here has really built us up.
Yeah, and let's be clear. I mean, these are just the first 90 days. You have some lofty goals of going well past the 90% threshold, but you just, you know, those first 3%, they occurred a little bit sooner than you would have even anticipated.
Oh, without a doubt.
Yeah.
If we'd have had those results in 6 months or a year, I would have been happy. And the first 90 days was amazing.
Now, we talked about quality assurance, right? So, I mean, I'm assuming this ties, this new metric here ties to the 3 percentage point increase, which is, you know, some of it has to do with the fact that now you can spend more time monitoring your agents and adding value as a supervisor, not in focusing on the administrative, daily, boring, manual tasks, but on really helping your agents or you know, advocating on behalf of your customers. So we sort of talked about this loosely, but this is actually sort of the KPI itself, which is that your QA capabilities in terms of customer calls, not only are you doing it faster, but you're doing 66% more than you were prior, right?
Oh, sure. Having all of the recorded calls attached to the ServiceNow cases and incidents, I know I've touched on that briefly already, but that's allowed us to QA 10 calls per agent per month, rather than the 6 calls per agent per month we had previously done. Mm-hmm. This has allowed me to free up time for our supervisors to spend more time on the professional development with our agents. I know, again, it's something I touched on, but it's making the overall call center experience better.
Yep. And some of the other improvements also had to do with just call answer rate. So call answer rate, I mean, if you can break down what that is for our audience who may not necessarily be, you know, have your background or depth of background in the contact center space. And also, you know, what is 5%? Is that a lot? I mean, break that down for us.
Well, I mean, to break it down simply, you're looking at a call answer rate is a call that's answered that comes into a desk. I know that sounds crazy. Why don't you answer every call? Well, you have a finite number of people that are able to answer calls. If you staffed for your full amount, you'd have a whole lot of people sitting around to take 1 or 2 phone calls in a shift. Mm-hmm. The 5%, yes, that's huge. So our 5% went from 88 to 93%. Wow. So that means 93% of the time somebody calls in, they're speaking to a live agent. They're not getting a voicemail. Realistically, our queue time is generally less than 1 minute. So you could almost say that 93% of the time, people are in queue for less than a minute. 5% is a gigantic growth rate in the first 90 days of using a product.
So if I'm a customer and I'm calling into Ingles, right? It could be the IT help desk through ITSM or an end customer. What you're telling me is that my probability of one, not waiting for an enormous amount of time, which is one of the biggest frustrations, right, when people call in. But two, knowing that I'm going to get through to an agent, which again, I'm most likely, to your point, people call in when things are complex. So presumably there's a degree of urgency. They need to speak to somebody. You're not going to abuse, my patience, but in fact, I'm going to get to someone quickly. And just the comfort of knowing that, with a combined system of 3C Logic and ServiceNow, Ingles is able to make that possible better now than before, right?
Yeah. I mean, much, much more so.
And that was one of the first real main impacts. I mean, there were others. I mean, those were just some of the highlight KPIs, but you talked about, and now it takes about less than a minute, for an incoming caller to be connected. And let's be clear, to the appropriate agent, which is part of the challenge, right? So when you integrate your telephony system with ServiceNow, we can know who the caller is, why they might be calling, what they might be calling about. And is there a need to designate them or send them to an agent that has a specific set of skill sets, as opposed to the next available agent that may just transfer them through a number of different people before they finally get to that right person, which of course, all that does is exacerbate the customer experience. But you were able to reduce the average handle time as well by a minute. So it's not just how quickly do you reach an agent, but how long does it take to solve the inquiry, right?
Well, absolutely. And, and simply put, where is that important? Well, shorter calls have resulted in more calls answered by one agent. Where does that come in to be more important is I'm offering more efficient service. We're answering a higher rate of our calls in less time. What does that mean? It means I don't have to add additional agents to do the same amount of work.
Right. So just operationally, you're saving annually on the cost of having to just add headcount. And instead, the technology is now making the headcount you have that much more efficient, which is really cool. Congratulations, by the way.
Awesome.
So we talked about this. I think at this point, I think the audience should get to see a theme here. But one of the things we didn't talk about is in QAing the engagements and doing that quality assurance. You kind of hit on this idea of, taking a look at how often is there dead air, right? And dead air is the idea of maybe I put somebody on hold, maybe, I go search for an answer, but there's sort of a a tolerance threshold before someone starts saying, hello, you still there? So, that could be a compliance point, right? But give us an idea when you talk about streamlined compliance, now that you've got this combined telephony platform with ServiceNow, and you're using the speech analytics and AI, when you talk about streamlining compliance, what does that look like?
Well, I mean, it's to streamline compliance, we have to be able to spot non-compliance, right? Who's not using the correct scripts on a call? Where is that dead air time on a call? Realistically, we're in the business of a customer experience. All of our customers may be internal employees to Ingles Markets, but we're all still in the same business of trying to give that best customer experience. And like I said, pointing out the non-compliance is the best way to get compliance. Mm-hmm. The software allows me to quickly spot that dead air time. It allows me to figure out who's using scripts and who's not. Allows me to see if there's a ticket made for every call. Is there a case or an incident made for every call that comes in? The answer I can tell you emphatically looking at things is yes, there should be. Is it always happening? No, but this gives us an option to look to make sure that it is.
Gotcha. And what you're talking about here is just the ability to standardize the service, right? And also, I mean, if you're bringing on new agents, right, because that happens sometimes, there's turnover, you can bring them up to speed and get them to be compliant and fit the process sooner rather than later, because you can sort of have that oversight without being, literally looking over their shoulder, right?
Yep, allows us to spot issues pretty quickly.
Now that sort of gets into the whole idea of scalable coaching, right? I think we kind of talked about the benefits of being able to spend more time coaching because you now know where the coaching is best suited in terms of time spent by your staff. Anything to add there? Or?
Well, I mean, realistically, we're looking mostly at the speech recognition. That was really a big selling point for us. So it allowed us to quickly identify agent issues, again, into the non-compliance, the dead air, the scripts. the ability that grants us to listen to a call with the evaluation form on the screen, that's what's allowing us to review 10 calls rather than 6 calls per agent.
Yep.
Our agent development, spotting the non-compliance by agents, reducing our overall dead air time, as well as coaching, being able to play snippets of calls rather than the whole call for an individual. Remember, in the past, we had to go grab that random call, hope that it was one that we should coach on, and then play out that call. If it's a 15-minute call, and you're going to play 3 calls for an agent, you've just taken 45 minutes just to play them. That's not doing any of the coaching or the mentoring in between.
Yeah, and that hits on kind of the reduction in administrative tasks, right? So let's talk about you and your team here. You mentioned that it's saving you guys quite a bit of time. I think you said something like 40% of their days being given back to them to go do things that drive more value. It could be coaching, as an example. Tell us about some of the reductions in manual tasks that you've seen so far, and that maybe will continue to improve.
Well, and really to expound on what we were just talking about is the real time savings that I'm getting is the time it takes for a supervisor to locate a recorded call and complete an evaluation near half the time that it took using our prior system. Mm-hmm. And that in and of itself is just the whole piece.
And then, of course, the icing on the entire cake here is the fact that, and we kind of alluded to this single source of truth, but all this is happening on top of your ServiceNow platform, right? So your use of ServiceNow, can you explain a little bit to the audience, what is the role of ServiceNow in this big picture here?
It's ServiceNow, again, we're trying to create that single source of truth. Mm-hmm. As I said, we haven't been long to ServiceNow. Late 2019, 2020, we moved into 3C Logic. We use CSM, we use ITSM. We are constantly evaluating for our next step to integrate into this company. ServiceNow has been a huge boost to the productivity of this company, and we do look to continue that in whatever way we can.
Yeah, but of course, when it comes to ServiceNow, they specialize in workflow, right? Whether it's ITSM, CSM, and typically it's along digital mediums, right? It's the self-service portal. It could be a ServiceNow virtual agent or chat. It could be obviously when people email in, it converts it into a ticket or case. But at the same time, to your point, there's always the inevitability that someone may not be able to resolve their issues over digital mediums, and they need to call in, again, to some of our earlier points, because it's time sensitive, as an example. And so being able to link that experience back to where effectively work is getting processed, which is the ServiceNow platform, I guess was not just comparing to what you had before, but it's a joint solution that's really together added a lot of time saving and value for Ingles, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, just if nothing else, the ability to report phone calls with tickets. I mean, if we can. If we have a case record, an incident record, and we can determine how many calls are coming in, I could break them down by channel better. I mean, just to be able to run the business more efficiently and be able to put it all in one place. That's probably the biggest part, especially from an agent standpoint. If you look at it, having everything in one small suite makes everything a lot easier.
I bet. Well, then let me take the reins here, and for our audience, if they haven't caught on yet, we've been talking about the value of the 3C Logic platform for ServiceNow, and obviously how it was leveraged successfully by the Ingles team. And again, kudos, Bill, to your team and your successes so far. And obviously, I don't think we're going to stop there. But for those of you who don't know what 3C Logic does, we are a contact center voice-enabled platform for the ServiceNow SKU, whether it's CSM, IT service management, or even employee workflows or an HR capacity. And we've been doing this for a number of years as the #1 integration app on the ServiceNow store, a successful ServiceNow technology partner. And everything we do is hosted on the Amazon Web Services Cloud. So we have deployments of customers all over the world, every walk of life, and typically organizations that are of a global 2000 nature, with customers spanning today 5 continents. So it's, Bill, I got to say, it's been a real pleasure to kind of just hear, in your own words, what has been the value of having a 3C Logic solution integrated with ServiceNow. Any final thoughts or messages you'd like to share with the audience?
No, I mean, I'd recommend the product to anybody. If you have a ServiceNow install, to use 3C Logic for your contact center, it's a great combination. It really gets out there. The integration, the setup was easy. It was quick. I'd like to say it was painless. It's a software install. We could probably have a couple pain points, but really nothing major.
Well, I appreciate that, Bill. Well, with that, I just want to say thank you to you, Bill, especially, and your team, and to our audience for taking the time to hear a little bit of Bill's story and their successes over at Ingles Market. If any of you have any questions, you're welcome to reach out to us directly at info@3clogic.com. Again, that's info@3clogic.com. My name is Guillaume. It's been my pleasure to be your host. Bill, thanks again for taking the time today to share your story, and look forward to working with you and continuing our partnership with Ingles.
Thank you.
All the best, Bill. Talk to you soon.